Hello, I'm your host, Hamid Rasheed. Thank you for taking time out to join us once again for the Black Horizons program. Many of our viewers may have been surprised or slightly shocked this week to learn of the invasion of the tiny Caribbean island of Grenada by a regional force led by some 1,900 U.S. Marines. But it was hardly a new development in U.S. Relations with its southern neighbors. In fact, officials of Grenada have been warning their populace of an impending invasion from the U.S. for some time now. In today's program, we will examine the background to this week's invasion, and next week in Part 2, we will attempt to assess the legal, political, and strategical implications of the invasion and its impact on the future of Grenada and the Central American region generally. I have joining me on the program today to provide his analysis of the invasion Nazir, Rzvi, who is a teacher of social studies at the Cole Harbour High School and a member of the Halifax-based Caribbean Information Group. Mr. Rzvi, many of our viewers will recall, appeared with me last year when we did a three-part series dealing with the situation in Grenada. Mr. Rzvi has visited the island personally and has first-hand knowledge of the situation there. We also did a program on the possibility of an invasion of Grenada earlier this year in April. Brother Nazir, welcome back to the Black Horizons program. A very sad situation in Grenada. I'd like to begin our program, as I mentioned, in April of this year. We did a program where you warned of an impending invasion of Grenada. Now here we are some 6 months later, and the invasion has occurred. Do you think that the Americans acted at a moment of opportunity and that the killing of the Prime Minister in Grenada a week or so ago created a situation which made it right for the U.S. to intervene?
Before I say yes, let me explain to you why I said it and why it is not a surprise. Definitely it is very sad and very insulting for the people of the third world, yet it is not a surprise to me, because when I visited Grenada, naturally I had to go to Barbados first, and in Barbados what I noticed, and I think anybody could know, that some of the reactionaries who were living in exile, and this is the place where American embassy is, these things were being cooked up every day. You know, the CIA had been very active in Barbados. The Americans right from the start showed all kind of antagonistic attitude. As a matter of fact, they rejected anything Grenada did, no matter how good it was. And there is no doubt that American policy, with, of course, inspired by CIA, has been right from the start that we must, what you call it, nib in the bud. Because their idea was that it is the first English-speaking country where a different kind of progressive work has begun, and they became very nervous, and therefore their planning has been very systematic. It has been very deep. As a matter of fact, in Grenada, that was my questions to most of the people I asked, that not what you are doing, how you are going to defend. I came to the extent that when our union leader, Noel Vincent, who has been killed, who visited Halifax on the invitation of our labor organization and Oxfam, that was the question again I asked. And my question was, and here I repeat, how would you react, Bay of Pigs? And his answer was that we would fight to our last soldier and last person what we have. So in that way, I would say that, I can go on and on. I don't want to take all the time on that President Reagan already mentioned on the map It was very, I think I mentioned already in the program that 500 medical students who are living next door to where the airfield has been under construction, and yet the aero photo had to be taken to show to the world that how dangerous and how big and all. So it has been planned right from the start. It was only a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we get into discussing some of the specifics of the invasion, as I said at the beginning of today's program, the invasion of Grenada is not without precedent in U.S. foreign policy. In fact, I understand that there have been several instances in the past, going back as far as the mid-19th century, where the United States has taken this kind of covert action in the region. Is that so?
Yes, actually, if we start right from the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, and then you take, the Spanish-American War, and we go on quoting Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, which is in 1865, and so-called liberal or democratic, President Lyndon Johnson. This has
1965 you're referring to, the 1965 invasion.
1965.
In fact, that was the second invasion, was it not, for that country?
Yes,
They had been
right.
invaded earlier?
Earlier on, yes. But it's one. But I'm saying as recent as that,
yes.
1965, as sending Marines, intervention, taking over, threatening. It is the very systematic policy of United States in this hemisphere, what we call it manifest destiny. So quite honestly, any students of history, even of grade 12, should know that what their foreign policy, human policy, and also the policy in the Caribbean as well as Latin America has been. So the difference is one and only one, that these events have taken place when the third world countries were still colonies. I think that another difference is when whole Africa was practically half slave. So therefore, what we are seeing now, it is not any change in the policy or new thing. It is that the reaction is different. And I would put in this word, the action is same, reaction is different.
Right. Well, I read a local media source this week which suggested that this week's invasion was not unplanned, and in fact that a dress rehearsal had taken place some 2 years ago in the 1981 war games in the very same region.
Yeah.
What is your opinion of this? Do you believe this to be correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, not only that this dress rehearsal was particularly for that tiny island. As a matter of fact, this dress rehearsal was definitely aimed at Grenada, and it has also some other implications, and one of them was that, look, if any Caribbean island, Grenada and other than Grenada, really tries to do what United States does not want, that's the way we are going to deal with it. If you recall, when there was a little bit of upheaval in Trinidad, and when the government was really challenged and army was involved, some progressive element, it was the same reaction. In other words, the Caribbean countries working with United States, or United States really keeping them under their thumb, has been again a very systematic policy. So this war game is a very regular thing. I think the reason we are trying to quote this war game is because it has now shown again the invasion. If there was no invasion, people would have thought that the war game was really a TV show. But it is not. It is a very systematic policy, and I have no doubt in any way to say that this war game was purely an experiment and it was not designed against Grenada. It was.
Because there's some striking similarities when you look at the war games and the what took place and so on. It was exact set of circumstances that parallel almost exactly the invasion that's just taken place this week.
Yes, yes. I mean because of the time. Otherwise, all the names they mentioned, and the landing, the marine, and other Caribbean countries, trying to cooperate with the United States. Everything, all the similarities are there, and that is how these things are done.
Right.
Systematically.
Well, I'd like to turn now to some discussion of the alleged reasons given by the U.S. for their intervention. President Reagan, when he was interviewed on the major networks the morning of the invasion, cited three principal reasons for the invasion. First of all, he said that they had received an urgent request from the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Secondly, he was concerned about the protection of the U.S. lives in Grenada. And thirdly, he spoke of the need to establish or to restore the democratic institutions. I'd like to ask you of your view of the OECS call for help. Isn't it, in fact, a camouflage for something that the U.S. very much wanted to do on its own anyway?
I think those people who have watched CBC Journal, they could easily see that Dennis Healy, from United Kingdom, he already partly answered your question when he said that the involvement of the Caribbean countries is not really the invitation. It is a very long-term, well-worked out orchestrations of some action which United States wanted to take. The reason is this, that Caribbean countries, they are tiny countries. They have very limited resources. They are in several groups. For example, one is the Eastern Caribbean organizations. Then they have larger Caribbean organization. Then they have OAS, Organization of American States. Then it is Commonwealth. Then it is United Nations. Then they are also the part of non-aligned.
Yes.
And then they are also the part of the third world. And last but never least, they are all have experienced the same thing: slavery, insult, degradations, and now, last but never least, a complete dictation from United States. So to think that it was really initiated by Caribbean countries is just saying that colonialism was embraced by the colonial countries and the imperialists didn't want anything to do. So no, it is all orchestrated by the United States, and we don't know all the detail. I think they have to come out later that how much money has been promised, how much help they would get in exchange of this inhuman act, how, a lot of things have been done, behind the scene. We are only being told that these countries are with US. Then, at no point it has been stated that certain countries which are pretty strong and they count, they have also opposed. For example, very little attention has been paid that Guyana opposed it very strongly. Very little had been said that the next door OAS country, Mexico, hated it. So in other words, it is only the part of the so-called explanation given from the US point of view by camouflaging the word you use and also hiding a lot of things. It is not the total story.
In fact, I saw one media source who referred to the OECS as the fig leaf that covered the American imperialism.
Right.
And in fact, it's been suggested that this action was more or less unilateral on the part of the United States, because many of the people who were consulted, you've talked about others in the region, but certainly other people, allies and so on, many people were not in favor and had advised the U.S. against this.
Yes.
And it appears as though the U.S. went on until they found somebody somewhere who would agree with it.
I mean, just imagine that Mrs. Thatcher did not approve. Just imagine. They have the very similar ideology. It is, I think, to me, it is very similar to the U.S. action in Vietnam. It was U.S. invasion, and I would say U.S. annihilation of that country, and yet you saw the soldiers from Australia and from New Zealand. In other words, just to bring some token from other places to prove that it is really perhaps international act in the name of justice and peace and order. No, it is historically, ideologically, and also the CIA-oriented act. And as I said, in no way it was a surprise to me. In no way, not even for a second.
I'd be interested in your assessment of the situation of these OECS countries who made this request. Do they have anything to fear, or did they have anything to fear from Grenada? Are their islands stable, more or less, or did they have anything to fear of the regime in Grenada?
Actually, if you look at the climate of the Caribbean countries now, by the way, before I come to that point, let me also tell you this, that even in the English-speaking countries, this is not the first case. A naked invasion did not take place, but when Chedi Jagan took over Guyana,
Yes.
as a Marxist prime minister, elected, supported, that was the time when you could see the hegemony of United States and United Kingdom. At that time, what had happened is that United States approved, and of course, under colonial system, United Kingdom's troops came in. So this is, again, I am quoting that it is a tradition. Now, when it comes to the fear, actually the fear is that when you look at the present government, like Siaga, generally if I name him, I don't say Siaga, I say Siaga. Because it is CIA government openly. I already told you what kind of country Barbados is. In peak period, there are more American tourists than Barbadians themselves. They survive on the charity and few crumbs which are thrown by the U.S. rich imperialism to them. So it is quite honestly the economic choking of this island, total dependence on U.S., which compels them to go along under coercion. And it is that kind of fear. In other words, it is the ruling class, and especially these two countries I quoted, which have some bearing. And of course, the third one is Trinidad, which is a little bit prosperous. But mainly the fear is in Barbados and Jamaica, because they have very high unemployment. Their government is very unfair. And so their fear is that they don't want to see, that means the ruling class, that this example of progressive government may reach into the mind of the people to their island. And that fear is very logical and very real. But other than that, any fear that a tiny island is going to take over or a tiny island going to conquer is all concocted. It is the fear, I would put in these words. I think especially these two Caribbean countries have the fear against fairness and justice, because they want to thrive on injustice. That is the only fear I see.
Well, now, another reason cited by the President to an attempt to rationalize this action was the alleged threat to U.S. Citizens. How real, in your opinion, was this threat?
I think that one is so unreal that it cannot be considered even a joke, because there were 500 medical students on the island, and also other American citizens, roughly 1,000. I talked to them, I met them. For last 4 years, they have been pretty happy. Even when this military government, which took over after Bishop's assassination, the vice chancellor of the university, or they call it president, when he was interviewed, he said all the students were quite safe and happy. And by the way, Austin, the first person he interviewed, and at least he knew that, was this vice chancellor, to tell that everything is okay, and it came in the news. Yesterday, in ABC News, the same guy, after meeting the president, says, I think the fear was real. Yeah. Now, how naive one can be to believe what they are saying. And in my own assessment, there was no fear. I think, and let us face it, even Cuba has accepted it. Caribbean countries cannot have on any occasion, either in the terms of tax or in the terms of power, really to harm any U.S. citizen. They know the power of U.S. citizen. To think that they were going to kill and massacre, it is all concocted. There is no reality.
In fact, isn't it true that Jacobs,
Yes.
at the OAS meeting,
Yes.
did he not read correspondence that had been forwarded to the United States indicating that the Canadians as well as the Americans were going to be free to
Only
leave?
2 days ago in OAS, which again ABC News produced, that he spoke and he said that all, not only, I mean, people are forgetting, there are some British too. There are some tourists as well, you know. I mean, one thing which is very interesting to note, that no matter what part of the world is, suddenly even the second-rate citizen, the blacks of United States, they become so important in any part of the world that sometimes you have to send 7th Fleet to rescue one American. You know, there are so many foreigners. All lives are equally important, and the assurance has been given time and time again. Even again, I repeat, you know, Austin, that was the first statement he ever made, that everything would be looked after and all the lives and property would be secure. Therefore, to come to give the reasons that American life and property has been in danger,
In fact, isn't the reverse true? Didn't the invasion place the from the reports I saw, there was reports of shooting in the immediate vicinity of the medical school. In fact, the Canadians were supposed to leave that very day and so on. Didn't the American action place Canadian lives in jeopardy?
Very much. I think that is one thing the Canadian government has to find out, and as you notice that a Canadian plane has not been allowed to land. The foreign journalists have not been allowed. So quite honestly, whatever information we are getting, it is far from the truth, because there is very little. It is the information we are getting from Marines and from forces and CIA. We are not getting any truth. So therefore, I think it is very, very difficult to conclude anything, because we really lack any authentic information.
How significant on this point of information, how significant do you think it is, the fact that the United States has prevented a journalist from visiting the island, even though since the very early on in the invasion they said that most things were secure despite some fighting in some scattered locations? Do you think this is an attempt to suppress
As a matter of fact, this is very, very significant, because that prevention of foreign journalists really, in my own analysis, makes me believe that whatever is coming, for example, so many Cuban soldiers and they had arms and ammunition and the colonel and the paper and all that, it is in no way it can be different from all the lies which have been told, you know, when the question came in Korea or Vietnam or, you know, any other place. I think it is all concoction. I think it is a deliberate attempt to prevent foreign journalists so that they can prepare everything, whatever they want us to believe.
So we pretty have to take their word for it. Do you also think that there might be more resistance to the invasion than they would want us to believe? And I heard Jacobs, for example, say at the OAS meeting that there have been substantial numbers of Grenadian civilians that have been killed, yet we don't hear any reports on that from the U.S. authorities. Do you think this might be another aspect?
Oh, if you there's no doubt about that. If you look at our foreign secretary, you know, saying that they got more resistance than they had expected, and what it means is the resistance from the civilian, because I know the island very well. They did not approve definitely the coup because the party was divided on that issue, but they don't approve in any way the intervention and occupation by United States. So naturally, I mean, the civilian, because they are all politicized, they want to defend their country, so resistance, not only there has been resistance, there is resistance, and there will be resistance.
Mm-hmm. Well, with respect to the restoration of democratic institutions, isn't the president really saying that the U.S. can't afford to see any any ideologically different state, even if it's a tiny island like Grenada?
Yes, I think that is the thing which has to be well understood by all of us, that it has nothing to do with democracy, because if really democracy is very dear to heart to US government, then the Chile should be the first country to be invaded. South Africa should be the first country to be invaded and taken over. It is exactly this point that no government in the world generally, but in Caribbean and Latin America particularly, should be allowed to survive, whether it is Grenada or whether it is Nicaragua. The only reason Cuba has survived because there has been international agreement, and even then it was invaded. So it is purely ideological, and the crucial issue for the people of the Caribbean is to address to themselves that they have only two choices: either to choose a progressive path as they did, or to accept US imperialism forever, because they really have no choice. It is I mean, look at Haiti. How many times it has been invaded, occupied, kept as a colony by USA, and there is nothing but poverty and beggary. It is the most hateful dictatorship in which the black people are also blamed because their population is black, and nothing has ever been done. Why that we don't have any democratic institution there? I think that should be the first country where should have really a good democracy.
In fact, hasn't the U.S. record with respect to safeguarding democracy in the region been a very bad one? Haven't many of the occupations in the past been followed by some of the worst dictatorships that we've seen?
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you look at it, that's why I gave the example of Nicaragua. And actually, we have to go further. Actually, to me, this particular invasion in the terms of democracy and in the terms of intervention is that occupation of Grenada by the US is a not dress real rehearsal for the occupation of Nicaragua. I think my fear is, as 6 months ago I told you about Grenada. Mm-hmm. Now I hope this time I am wrong, so that it is really a preparation for the occupation of Nicaragua.
Right. Well, in the minute or so that we have in today's program, this program will go to air when your group would have already been involved in some action on the local level. For those people who might want to get more information on Grenada, could you tell them how they could get in touch with your group?
Yes, I think I would very much appreciate, because it is a very human and crucial issue, that Caribbean Information Group very much like that the people, if they want to have more information as well as our resistance and opposition to it, that they could phone 423-9998, and also they could write to P.O. Box 7074, Halifax North, Halifax, Nova Scotia, B3K 5J4. And we are, as you already mentioned, there would be more news as well as news release coming to our media, and people should be really looking for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to thank you, Brother Nazir, for appearing. We've got to sign off for today. We want to invite you back next week, and we'll have part 2, and we'll do some analysis of the political, strategic implications of this invasion of the tiny island of Grenada. Thank you for watching. Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. I'm your host, Hamid Rasheed. Thanks for joining us once again. Last week we discussed the background of the invasion of the tiny Caribbean island of Grenada by a regional force led by some 1,900 U.S. Marines. In today's program, we will attempt to assess the legal, the political, and the strategical implications of the invasion and its impact on the future of Grenada and the Central American and Latin American region generally. I have joining me on the program Nazir, Rzvi, a teacher of social studies at Cole Harbour High School and a member of the Halifax-based Caribbean Information Group. As I mentioned last week, Mr. Rzvi has visited the island of Grenada and is knowledgeable about the situation there. Brother Nazir, welcome back for our second program.
Thank you.
Since our program last week, in addition to the original reasoning that the United States was putting forward for its invasion of Grenada, they have added a fourth reason, and that has to do with the strategic interests of the United States. They have been making much to do about the fact that there were armaments found on the island. They've stressed the impact of having the airstrip in Grenada and the possible ramifications of that for the United States. There's been talk of the danger to shipping of oil through the sea lanes and so on and so on. What is your view of the United States arguments about the strategic interests justifying the invasion of Grenada?
I think the U.S. plea, as far as the strategic importance is concerned, should be looked at it more not from the point of view of Grenada, but from the point of view of their political ideology. For example, any progressive government, that means the participation of the people, is considered dangerous for the U.S. And that is why Cuba, Grenada, and Nicaragua have been made, target, and then definitely the liberation movement in El Salvador. So therefore, if we take that point that the U.S. has a lot of importance in the terms, again I am repeating, in this movement, then we also accept that it is U.S. divine right to invade any part of the world generally, and the Caribbean particularly, because it is in their interest to invade. The point is to be made, and the question is to be asked, what has really Grenada done against U.S., which has undermined U.S. interest? And here it is. Can you imagine U.S. interest being undermined in a country where 500 students are studying on the soil of Grenada, where 500 other Americans are living, where American tourists are allowed to go and enjoy? And when you look at when the American boats are visiting, so if we put everything together, I don't think this argument holds any water other than that it is another excuse to invade.
Well, the Americans would have us believe that they were surprised by the fact that they found armaments and that there were soldiers, and they were surprised at the level of resistance and so on in Grenada. Do you believe that they were in fact surprised by this?
As a matter of fact, that one part, I think the many parts of our news and media has been quite hilarious, and as a matter of fact, as 1 hour of QSO worker, Caroline Green has already explained, and she has a long way to tell, especially Globe and Mail report, is that if a country has arms and ammunition, and if a country has army and the soldiers, what is really wrong with any country to have some forces and arms and ammunition to defend itself? If you go to Barbados or any other island on that part, you would find that there are more arms and more ammunitions just for the sake of their own defense. What is, as a matter of fact, what they are saying is that they are really concocting that they saw so much of it, because giving the idea that Grenada was really proposing to invade whole of Caribbean and take it over. While the story is, I have been on that island, I know quite well. The whole thing is that Grenada, right from the start, has been so much under threat. In other words, defense of Grenada has never been mentioned. When Bishop was alive, so many times it was mentioned that be prepared, anytime we can be invaded. And it has been very open statement made by United States, especially from Barbados. I was there at Christmas time, and even Christmas Eve, their newspaper said, let us have a vigilant Merry Christmas. In other words, at no time they were at ease. All the time they were under attack. And then they were so right. They have been invaded. And yet the media, and I am really disappointed that even Barbara Frum, Canadian media, has not been also very objective to tell, are you surprised to see so much arms? Are you expecting that much arms? I mean, what do you expect? Grenadian, that as soon as Americans invade, they all should lie down and say, okay, run it over. There has never been any amount of arms and ammunition more than any country of that size would need.
In fact, I was surprised by the apparent conflict between the official statements that were coming from the United States with respect to the level of sophistication of these armaments. The official sources would have us to believe that they were highly sophisticated armaments and so on, but yet when the news media was admitted to the island, it was suggested that many of the armaments were archaic, that they were very old.
Yes.
So there seemed to be some conflict of facts there. Another, and we've talked about this many times, another bugaboo that the Americans have seized upon was the international airport that was being constructed. And of course they have made the point many times that this could be used by the Cubans and by the Soviets, and that it was a military installation and not a civilian installation.
Right.
I was very interested to read this week the comments that were made by the British construction firm, suggesting that that this was not the case.
No.
He went on to point out that there were a number of things that one would expect from a military installation as opposed to a civilian airport installation.
Right.
What was your observation when you were there with respect to the airport?
First of all, we have to look at it that the construction of airport is not really the first planning of this revolutionary government. Airport was planned before that. The reason they could not construct was that Gary's government was so corrupt and so careless that there was never any money to do anything about it. So Grenada was living in poverty and decadence. Revolutionary government wanted to fulfill this need like any other Caribbean country, because tourism is their main thing. I mean, without tourism there is not much they can do. So therefore the first attempt by the revolutionary government was made to construct an airport which definitely, apart from touristic gain, would also have some prestige for that island, because St. Lucia has a big airport and the planes are landing and international tourists are coming. So therefore that, it is so logical and so understandable. And I even met, I think I mentioned in this program, that I met the manager of that airport constructions, Ronald Smith, who was trained here in Nova Scotia, and it was just like any other airport. I think what one we should look at it is this, that anything Grenada did, whether it was building the airport or having the army or even building the road, it was all construed as a conspiracy against United States, no matter what they did. And it is one of those links which is brought in that they were trying to overthrow. And I would go as far as that if their purpose was or is to do anything against the United States, Grenada is not the place to build a big airport. There are other places in the same region. They can do it. So it is really all farce. There is no doubt about that.
Well, I'd like to turn now to some examination of the legal implications of the American invasion of Grenada. What is your view of this? Would you consider it to be illegal? Is it consistent with the OAS Charter and the UN Charter?
First of all, let us look at the charter of the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean State itself. Legally and also constitutionally, this particular organization in 1981 came to the conclusion, and of course initiated by United States, that for a collective security, that whenever there is any problem, they all would come together and make sure that there is no aggression or invasion. And even in that charter, Article 8 already it tells quite openly that any intervention has to be agreed upon unanimously.
Yes.
And while everybody knows that when it was discussed, and what to talk of unanimity, there was such a big disagreement about it. So legally and also on the question of agreement, this particular item can never be applied. It is not possible. When we come to the United Nations, I think the best thing for us is to look at it that when things were getting bad, I think later on I will tell you in the chronological order, starting right from the October 5th and 6th and coming, Cuba especially, because they were involved in building the country, they were trying to bring some solutions in the terms of international agreement, and Cuba did write to the president that they wanted some negotiation. All these things.
To the President of the United States?
Yes, to the President of the United States.
Yes.
So if it was if the whole thing was to be dealt with in the name of internationalism or United Nations, that was the place to be discussed beforehand, and then United Nations would have taken the issue to safeguard the life and property of the Americans or the British of any nationality. I mean, it is hilarious to think that in order to save the life of the people, there has to be invasion. Most of the time such lives are saved, as it happened in case of hostages in Tehran, in Iran, that the whole thing was brought to the United Nations, and United Nations was involved, negotiation was going on, and no settlement was made, even one attempt was made to invade and free them. Thanks heaven it didn't work out, otherwise maybe the hostages might have been killed. So despite all that mistakes, again the repetition of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, my understanding of the OAS Charter also is that it speaks very clearly against this kind of intervention. In fact, the whole history of the OAS was to prevent this kind of thing from happening. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it is. Actually, the whole idea of the OAS is that, they call it collective security,
yes,
that whenever there is any problem or whenever there is any issue of this nature, it should be discussed and the decision should be made how to deal with the situation. Here, if you look at it, that it is said, that there has been already negotiation between certain islands and the President of United States. The President of United States, or I would say US government, has been initiating the whole thing against Grenada. It was not something very spontaneous, it was already planned. At last time you asked in the program, that how in 1981, the war game, Aberdeen was, in that way. So
in fact, since our program last week, it's been suggested by Barbados that the whole idea was initially suggested by the United States. They came to them and suggested that they might want to do this.
I mean, this is quite understandable. I mean, let us look at sometimes when we talk about the government, we really think that St. Lucia or St. Vincent or Barbados, perhaps these countries are just like another country like United States. I mean, these countries are hardly country, They are tiny island dependent upon U.S. policies and U.S. push and also U.S. manipulation. So to say that these countries suggested that we want invasion is a big joke. It was the participation of Jamaica and Barbados in the terms of force is purely token. Even some policemen were sent. I mean, they don't have a huge army, just to make sure that it is an international invasion. It is not American.
In fact, I want to turn to a minute to some discussion of the debate at the Security Council of the United Nations and the General Assembly. But before I do that, I read with some interest this week as well that the Lieutenant Governor in Grenada admitted that the letter requesting the U.S. invention had in fact been drafted by the United States and delivered to him by a person from the U.S. Embassy for his signature.
Yes.
which is quite an interesting revelation. I'd like to ask you now, can you tell us about the debates at the Security Council and at the United Nations? What has the United Nations done with this particular issue, and are you pleased with their findings?
First of all, whenever there is any issue, especially concerning USSR and USA, United Nations even more helpless than any other country involved. Let us not forget that that in the Security Council the discussion is really against USA, which is very similar to the Security Council discussing invasion in Afghanistan by USSR. So it runs very parallel. It is one of the superpowers involvement. It is not second or third or fourth kind of power. That is one thing which should be clear in our mind. The second thing is that in the Security Council, when after all that debate, when it came to the voting, as you realize that it was veto, and the veto was used by USA, and no country voted against, only few countries abstained. So in other words, the voting was very good, considering with what should be the moral standard of international community. But the point is, that is again is no more than a debate, because when it came to the General Assembly, as you notice, U.S. was condemned quite vociferously, and as also you are aware that when it came to the condemnations, Canada abstained. See, they did not join in, which is a typical, a liberal approach. So therefore, you can easily see that as far as international community is concerned, there has been enough condemnation. The debate has been good, and there is no doubt that U.S. has been declared guilty. But the point again comes: what happens after? Other than a great intellectual and academic debate.
But it is significant, I think, though,
it is very, very
that
important.
You have, what you really in fact have is at both the Security Council level
and
the General Assembly level, you have the United States stood alone.
Yes.
In both votes. In the case of the Security Council, it was 11. One was the United States using its veto power.
Right.
Again, in the General Assembly, the international community was unanimous, except for those that abstained. And the United States again was the only one who voted against it. So even though it's
that is definitely very significant, that international community has realized and accepted and acknowledged that it is a naked aggression.
Right. Well, you touched on Canadian abstention at the vote in the General Assembly. I'd like to just spend some time now exploring with you the Canadian reaction to the invasion and its impact on the Canadian influence in the area. I'd like to have you expand on it a little bit. What has been your view of the Canadian position? The various political parties, some have taken positions, some haven't taken positions. So on, how do you view the Canadian reaction?
Actually, except NDP, our political parties have not taken, firm position. As a matter of fact, it appears that the position has been taken in this particular case according to the ideology of the parties. For example, NDP has come out strongly against it. Liberals, as usual, have not condoned it, but have not condemned it, and the PC party apparently, as you can see, is accusing the Liberal Party, instead of condemning United States, accusing that you have not been a very good friend of U.S. In other words, if you were a good friend, this invasion would have been in cooperation and collaboration, perhaps, with that, despite the fact that Mrs. Thatcher disapproved that, and still Reagan went along. So therefore, this is one case where people can understand when it comes to the foreign policy, how three parties have their very defined position. I think it was a test case.
Well, the PC position doesn't seem to be that defined. I've been trying to determine what that position has been. There was reports of a chap who had gone there from the PC caucus last Sunday.
Right.
He came back, of course, and said he didn't think that it was justified. So they said, well, we have to wait for more
information.
Facts.
Yes.
The leader, on the other hand, has made several statements which would suggest that he has been pro-American.
Right.
Sinclair Stevens, who's
Right.
the external affairs critic,
Yeah.
seems to say, well, we don't have enough information. So there seems to be no clear position with respect to the Conservative Party.
But actually, in a case like that, if no position is taken, it is taken more of an approval than disapproval. There are certain issues that we don't hesitate, or we have no place not to take a position. You are quite right. It is very confused and wishy-washy position. But if you go deeply, a country has been invaded and raped, and yet we don't have enough information to take a position. I mean, what kind of interpretation one can take? If it was some minor case, if it was a case where really we were talking about how many guns are available and how many guns are not, then I could understand it. But here, 6,000 Marines, they invaded the country, and then still no position has been taken. And on the top of that, do you realize that until now, there has been no information available how many Grenadians have been killed?
Yes.
Practically nothing has been said, which says right away that either the life of the Cuban has some significant to prove that they were terrorists, or the Americans' life is very important, so that those dead bodies are brought in and people are crying and burial take place, while Grenadian, who cares? What does it matter?
Right. Well, as weak as the Liberal position on this matter has been, I think Prime Minister Trudeau was saying that, unless the Americans could demonstrate that there was some fear for the safety of the American citizens, he couldn't justify the invasion. Despite that, Canada abstained from the from the vote. Do you think there's some hypocrisy in that?
So I think it is the same consistent position which is taken by Canada on all issues. It is same position about Namibia, same position as Canada takes on South Africa, same position Canada takes on Grenada. I mean, it is such a defined policy of so-called liberalism that I don't like it, but I don't want to condemn it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to move on now to some discussion of the provisional government that is being proposed to be established to return, quote-unquote, democracy to Grenada. Does this, in your opinion, spell the end of the revolution and the New Jewel movement in Grenada?
Certainly not. Not only the end of the movement, whether it is New Jewel movement or any new movement, not only in Grenada, in whole of Caribbean, because it should be well understood that the problems of the Caribbeans are not exported problems, they are problem of the inside. For example, it has often been accused that they are exporting revolution, and we all know that the United States exports pornography, corruption, drug, invasion, war, that kind of exports is all the time, while the problem of the Caribbean country is poverty, unemployment, injustices, and exploitation. So unless those things are gone, sure, there will be no problem at all if they have full employment, if they have enough, people have not to starve and go hungry, naturally there will be no problem of any nature. But invasion does not solve.
Well, I'd like to bring you back, though, to a little more specific. In the case of Grenada itself, do you think that there's any immediate chance of the New Jewel movement playing any kind of significant role in any new government that's formed there, or what will we see happen? Will we see a return to the British constitutional system?
Actually, the new government in Grenada is not a government of the people. It is the imposition. First, there is an interim regime in Grenada to be set up within a week, as we got the report, and Sir Paul is, as a representative, of the coin would be having some people to look after. And he had made very plain on the initiative and suggestion of United States that it will be mainly businessmen and responsible people. You know, it is taken for granted that the responsible people are businessmen and no politician. So once they have taken the position, then within a year they are going to have election. And the election would be very similar what has happened in Jamaica. Because as you notice, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Siaga, was another hero who toured the island. And he has set the tone what kind of government is going to be. As a matter of fact, I would not be surprised, and it has also been reported by Ms. Green, that there is witch hunting going on. What to talk of New Jewel movement participating in the political matter, the witch hunting has been going on. It is not only code or few devils, you know, who have been arrested and they have been handed in. Anybody who has participated in any way in their legitimate government, there is a witch hunting. So the participation of New Jewel movement is at the moment is completely out.
Well, we only have a few minutes left on today's program, and we have one very important area that we haven't touched on, and that is, I'd like to get your assessment of the implications of the U.S. invasion for Latin America and the Central American region and the Caribbean generally. What are the implications, do you think?
First of all, the implication as far as this invasion is concerned, it is really a green light as far as the CIA activities against Nicaragua is concerned, that we have already wiped out one place very successfully. Now let us concentrate on Nicaragua and make sure that this government also falls. That is one. Another thing is that it is also a message given by force to the Caribbean countries as well as Latin American countries that look, we don't negotiate. We only negotiate as long as we want, and whenever it suits us, we also invade. And if this invasion can go just like that, as it has happened, I don't see really any future of any progress in Latin American countries other than one invasion after another. So I feel extremely disturbed on this particular event. It is not just one island.
I see Forbes Burnham of Guyana has indicated and has placed on record at the UN that he fears that there might be some increased aggression towards his country as well as a result of this. Do you feel that this is posturing on his part, or is it
as a matter of fact, if he does not feel, then I think he is very unwise, because his country has been a target in the past, and Burnham has taken a position in this case, so I don't see how he can escape that problem, and therefore it is up to now the people of the Caribbean as well as the Caribbean countries to look into the mirror that what kind of government they want. If they want recolonization, I think there is all the opportunity there. But if they want any independence and progress, then I think they should really prepare themselves for something better than inviting or participating United States for invasion, and Burnham should be very upset.
Well, I wish we had more time to explore this point further, but I'm getting signals that our time is gone for the day. We want to thank you for watching and invite you back next week for Black Horizons.